They were left to burn beneath the desert sun. Two newborn girls, tiny, helpless, abandoned in an empty house where the walls radiated heat and the silence screamed. No water, no hope, just hunger and dust. Nobody would have found them, if not for him. A battered German shepherd named Rusty and his partner, a small-town cop with old wounds and a stubborn heart, walked into a nightmare that would test every shred of courage they had left. What happened next will break your heart, then heal it. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe in hope, if you believe every life deserves a second chance, hit that subscribe button because this is a miracle you'll never forget. Redstone Creek in summer felt like the world had been left on a stove and forgotten. The sky was an endless blue, so bright it hurt the eyes, and every inch of earth was scorched and parched. Even the oldest cottonwoods by the dried-up creek seemed to shrink into themselves. The only thing moving in the heat was the shimmer rising from cracked red dirt, and maybe, if you squinted, the ghosts of old cattle drives on the distant hills. On the edge of town, Officer Ethan Carter's patrol car rolled slow and steady, the engine groaning in protest at the climb. Ethan was 36, tall, built from years of labor and regret, his skin tanned and dusted with freckles. His short, sandy blonde hair, cut for utility not style, already showed streaks of gray. There was a gravity to his presence, a careful watchfulness. Underneath the uniform, there was the memory of a firefighter badge from his years in Austin, a different man, a different lifetime, before grief had sent him searching for a town that let a man breathe. The only real conversation Ethan ever had on patrol was with his partner, Rusty. The German shepherd was a survivor, his body marked by old wounds, a scar along the right flank, a left ear permanently bent at the tip, and paws that moved over desert ground as if born to it. At 8, he was more cautious than wild, but the fire in his amber eyes said he could still run down any coyote that got too close. In the heat, Rusty's black and tan coat shimmered, catching the dust and sunlight alike, so he always looked as though he carried a little piece of the earth on his back. Rusty hadn't always had a name. He was first spotted in a summer storm 2 years back, half-starved, fur-caked in the same ochre dust that colored the hills. Townsfolk had tried to coax him in with scraps, but he refused every hand, watching with a mix of hope and mistrust. For 3 days, Ethan had left bowls of water by the fence at his rental house, and for 3 nights, he'd heard the quiet lap of a tongue after midnight and the retreating shuffle of paws. On the 4th morning, as dawn burned gold along the horizon, Ethan stepped out to find the dog sitting squarely in the shade of his porch, dust sparkling on his fur, his eyes wary but unafraid. The dog's coat glowed rusty red in the sunrise, like iron after a storm. Ethan squatted down, careful and slow, and said, "Looks like the desert's named you already, friend." Since that moment, the name stuck. Rusty. The dog never left his side. On this day, the heat pressed in, dense and oppressive, making Ethan's uniform stick to his back as he drove slowly along Dusty Trail, the last paved road before the desert started its slow reclaim of the land. Windows were shut tight. The only movement on the street was a little girl crouched under the thin shade of a willow, tending to a ring of stray kittens, Daisy Franklin. 9 years old, skin tanned nearly brown, dark hair in 2 tight braids, eyes bright as blue glass. She had a heart for lost things. Kittens, lizards, half-drowned beetles after a rainstorm. Today, she carried a battered water jug, gently pouring cool relief for the kittens, glancing up at the distant police car as it passed. She smiled at Rusty, but he only watched the horizon. Inside the car, Ethan sipped from a warm thermos, sweat beading on his forehead. Rusty panted softly, eyes flicking between Ethan and the blur of houses rolling by. Suddenly, Rusty stiffened. His whole body shifted, nose twitching, head cocked toward the far end of the street where the Lomax house stood abandoned, a lonely husk against the blue sky. Ethan noticed the change. "What is it, boy?" Rusty's ears went up, and then a bark, urgent, sharp. Rusty put both paws on the dashboard and stared, laser-focused, at the Lomax house. Ethan's heart kicked up. He pulled the car to the curb, ignoring the heat that washed in when he opened the door. "Let's check it out." The yard of the Lomax house was a battlefield of sun-bleached weeds and broken glass. The chain-link fence had long since rusted through. Rusty led the way, slipping through a gap with a purpose Ethan recognized, a K9's instinct, the blood memory of rescue. As Ethan followed, boots crunching in the gravel, the world narrowed to heat and silence. But then, under it all, a sound. Faint, ragged, a cry, barely more than a squeak. Ethan stopped cold. Rusty darted toward the porch, nose pressed low, tail stiff with tension. He barked again, this time a desperate whine. He circled an old cardboard box wedged between two toppled chairs, then sat, pawing the air, his eyes fixed on Ethan. Ethan dropped to one knee. The box was filthy, its bottom stained, warped from the sun. With trembling hands, Ethan peeled back a flap and time slowed. Inside, pressed together, were two newborn girls. They wore hospital blankets, sweat-soaked, their skin raw and red from the heat. One had a shock of dark brown hair, the other's was pale gold and fine as silk. Their eyes opened only halfway, squinting, unfocused, their tiny lips cracked. The bigger one managed a weak, broken cry. Ethan's training took over. He gently lifted both girls, cradling them in his arms, mindful of the heat radiating from their bodies. They were limp, frighteningly light, breath shallow. Rusty whined, circling Ethan and the babies, licking one small foot with infinite gentleness. Across the street, Daisy saw the commotion. She froze, water jug halfway to a kitten's mouth, eyes wide, as she watched Officer Carter emerge from the house, arms full, Rusty pressed close to his side. Ethan staggered into the sunlight. The two girls held close to his chest, their sweat-damp hair clinging to his shirt. The heat was merciless. He glanced up, locking eyes with Daisy for an instant. Her jaw dropped, her small body rigid with shock and curiosity. "Daisy!" Ethan shouted, voice strained but commanding. "Go get your mom. Tell her to call 911. Now!" Daisy nodded, breaking from her trance, and sprinted barefoot toward her house, slamming the screen door behind her. Ethan hurried toward his cruiser, the weight of the world in his arms. Rusty danced around him, barking once more, his gaze never leaving the tiny forms. For one breathless moment, time hung suspended. The officer, the dog, the babies, all caught in the cruel brightness of the sun. He gently set the girls in the passenger seat, cranking the AC to full, and poured the last of his thermos water onto a clean rag to press against their foreheads. The smell of hot plastic and sweat filled the air. Rusty jumped into the back seat, panting hard, keeping his watch. Outside, the cicadas finally stirred, raising their chorus in the blazing afternoon. Daisy peeked from her front porch, her mother's silhouette rushing past, phone in hand. Ethan's hands shook as he looked down at the girls, so fragile, so nearly lost. He reached back and stroked Rusty's head, murmuring, "Good boy. You found them. You saved them." Rusty thumped his tail, but his eyes never left the babies. Above them, the sun blazed on, indifferent and unrelenting, as hope took its first trembling breath in the oven of Redstone Creek. The heat had not lessened. If anything, it pressed down with even more ferocity as Ethan Carter stepped away from the Lomax house, two newborns trembling in his arms. Sweat trickled into his eyes, stinging, but he held the girls tight, feeling the fragile flutter of their breath against his chest. The moment he hit the porch, Rusty was at his heels, head up, tail tense, scanning the wasteland between them and the distant cluster of buildings that marked downtown Redstone Creek. There was no time to waste. Even now, Ethan knew the desert sun could kill in minutes what cold might take hours. He spared a look for Daisy, who was standing barefoot on the gravel with her mother Amanda, a slender woman in her 30s, skin bronzed and lined, her brown hair pulled hastily into a knot. Amanda had a habit of biting her lip when anxious, and today her eyes, normally quick to warm, were wide with alarm as she cradled Daisy to her side, phone pressed to her ear. "Ambulance says 20 minutes, maybe more," Amanda called out, voice trembling. "They're stuck on the highway with a breakdown." Ethan's jaw clenched. 20 minutes was too long. "Tell them I'm heading for the clinic Main Street now," Ethan shouted back, then turned to Rusty. "Go, boy. Find us a path." The German Shepherd didn't hesitate. He leapt off the porch and darted through the tall, brittle grass, nose close to the cracked soil, moving with the easy certainty of a dog who'd learned the desert's secrets the hard way. Ethan followed, boots pounding, every step sending puffs of ochre dust into the air. He tried to shield the infants' heads with his elbow, feeling the way their bodies curled instinctively into any shade, any hint of coolness. They crossed an old wire fence, the metal so hot it burned Ethan's palm. He kept his focus on Rusty, who wove a path not straight but clever, skirting the worst of the exposed ground, leading them behind clumps of sagebrush and along the shadows thrown by abandoned sheds and broken-down cars. The world was a shimmer of white light, the air quivering. Somewhere a hawk called. Ethan's throat felt scraped raw, but he spoke softly to the girls. "Just hold on. You're not alone. I promise." Halfway across a field of dry cheatgrass, the earth buckled and split into a network of cracks wide enough to catch a foot. Rusty stopped, barked once, and nosed a route along the edge. Ethan, pulse thundering, followed every subtle cue, every sidestep, every warning glance. Once, Rusty paused abruptly, hackles rising. Ethan froze. Ahead, coiled beneath a flat stone, the diamond pattern of a rattlesnake shimmered in the sun. Rusty placed himself between the snake and Ethan, growling low, body taut. The snake, sensing no weakness, slithered away. Only when it vanished into the scrub did Rusty move on. Ethan felt the sun gnawing at his energy, every muscle heavy. The girls whimpered weakly, their tiny hands clutching at his uniform, sweat and dust painting streaks on their faces. He wanted desperately to give them water, but there was none left. His own lips were cracked, tongue thick with thirst. He pressed forward. It was then, just as hope began to flicker, that a cloud of dust rose on the far edge of the field. A battered Jeep lurched into view, backfiring, a blue tarp flapping on its roof. At the wheel was Jack Morrison, the town's resident eccentric. In his late 60s, Jack was as much a fixture as the saguaro's tall, gaunt, stooped, with skin like leather and a gray beard that tangled down his chest. His eyes, sharp as an owl's, missed nothing. People called him Crazy Jack for his habit of talking to birds and collecting lost car parts, but Ethan had always respected his stubborn independence. Jack swung the Jeep to a stop with a squeal of tires, dust billowing. "Heard the scanner," he said, voice raspy. "Figured you might need a lift." He wore a faded army jacket over a yellow t-shirt, cargo shorts, and mismatched socks. In his hand was a battered cooler. Jack's gaze fell on the girls, and for a heartbeat his eyes softened, old pain flickering across his face. Ethan wasted no time. He handed the girls to Jack with care, climbing into the back beside them. Rusty leapt in after, settling at Ethan's feet, nose pressed to the infant's blankets. Jack popped open the cooler and produced 2 bottles of water, one ice cold, beads forming on the plastic in the heat. "Here," he said, voice gruff but gentle. "Not too much, but get them wet. We'll make it fast." He handed Ethan a clean cloth, and Ethan quickly dampened the babies' foreheads, letting cool drops trickle down their temples. The smallest one shivered, lips moving in a silent sigh. Jack tore across the fields, avoiding potholes and dips by instinct. He took back roads only he knew, weaving past abandoned oil drums and the skeletons of old farm machinery. "You know," Jack said between gears, "this isn't the first time the desert's tried to take someone." His voice was far away, eyes narrowed. "My wife, we lost her to the heat years ago. That's why I keep this thing ready." He nodded at the cooler, not meeting Ethan's gaze. As the Jeep bounced into town, people turned to stare Amanda and Daisy at the edge of the road, hands shielding their eyes, the old barber pausing mid-shave in his doorway. Dust swirled around the tires. The clinic appeared, a squat, whitewashed building shimmering in the heat haze, a blue cross painted on the side. Jack skidded to a stop. "Go," he urged. Ethan gathered the girls, murmured a rushed thanks, and ran toward the doors with Rusty sprinting ahead, barking to clear the path. Jack stayed behind, engine running, a silent sentinel watching Ethan disappear inside. He took a long pull from his own water bottle, looking at the spot where the girls had lain. His weathered face tightened, but he nodded once, as if affirming some private vow, and turned his gaze to the open road. Inside the clinic, Ethan's world narrowed to cool air, tile floors, and fluorescent light. But that would be another chapter's story. For now, the rescue across the burning fields was done, and in the memory of every person who witnessed it, one image remained: a sunburned cop, a loyal dog, and 2 fragile lives cradled between them, defying the desert. Inside the Redstone Creek Clinic, the cold air was a shock after the relentless heat. The lobby was small, the walls painted a fading mint green, the smell of antiseptic sharp and clean. Linda Brooks, the head nurse, was already there, tall and broad-shouldered in her blue scrubs, silver hair pulled tight in a braid down her back, her expression a blend of calm and command. She moved with brisk efficiency, calling to the single on-duty doctor, Dr. Stephen Wells, a lean man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and gentle, steady hands. They lifted the infants from Ethan's arms, their movements practiced but tender, immediately checking pulses, unwrapping the sweat-soaked blankets, and laying cool compresses on tiny chests and foreheads. Dr. Wells, voice low but soothing, began threading an IV into the smaller baby's hand. Severely dehydrated, core temp too high. Let's get those fluids going. Linda nodded, snapping into action, her years of pediatric experience clear in the way she murmured soft encouragements and offered a smile that managed to pierce even the thick fog of fear in Ethan's mind. Ethan hovered by the exam table, his shirt stuck to his back, hands shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. Rusty lay at his feet, eyes fixed on the twins. Linda shot him a reassuring look, then pressed a cool bottle of water into his palm. "You did good, officer. Both of you." Ethan managed a nod, his voice thin. "Rusty found them. I just followed his lead." Linda smiled, lines deepening around her eyes. Sometimes that's the smartest thing a man can do. A commotion at the doorway drew everyone's attention. In hurried Rachel Monroe, a detective with the county sheriff's office, called in for the case. Rachel was in her late 20s, small and wiry with a mess of copper-red curls tied up under a baseball cap, skin dotted with freckles, green eyes bright with focus. Her jeans and plain t-shirt were dusty from the drive, and a badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Rachel was sharp-tongued, persistent, and carried herself with a confidence that sometimes bordered on brash, but those who knew her best trusted her instincts without question. She nodded at Ethan, barely glancing at his state. "You all right?" Ethan shrugged. "Could be worse. It's the babies we need to worry about." As Dr. Wells and Linda worked, Rachel got the summary of what happened from Ethan, all the while jotting notes in a battered black notebook. "Show me the house," she said, her voice brisk. Ethan nodded, signaling to Rusty, who was already up and at his side. As the trio made their way back toward Dusty Trail, the air outside seemed even hotter than before. At the abandoned Lomax house, Rachel scanned the perimeter, eyes narrowed against the harsh sun. "Let's work methodically," she said, her tone all business. Ethan let Rusty off leash. The German shepherd sniffed around the porch, then doubled back toward the side yard, tail wagging, nose low. Rachel followed, pausing to snap photos of tire tracks crisscrossing the dirt. "See these?" she said, pointing to a deep imprint. "Pickup truck, heavy-duty tread, recent." She knelt down, brushing the red dust with her gloved fingers. "Still fresh. Whoever dropped the babies off, they didn't want to be seen." Ethan bent closer. "Any way to get a print off that?" Rachel shook her head. "Dust is too dry, but it's a start." Meanwhile, Rusty let out a sharp bark and pawed at something buried near a stand of prickly pear. Ethan hurried over and found Rusty nudging at a small, dirty cloth pale yellow with faded cartoon ducks, crusted in sand and stained with old milk. Rachel snapped on latex gloves, lifting the cloth. "A baby's burp rag. Looks like formula." She held it to her nose, wrinkling her face. "Soured. Probably been out here since this morning." She glanced at Ethan. "You know, there's a chance the mother might have been nearby for a while, maybe watched from a distance before leaving." Rachel scanned the area with a practiced gaze, looking for other discarded items or footprints. She spotted a partial shoe print by the driver's side of the tracks, narrow, likely a woman's, the tread worn smooth. She was alone, or at least the one carrying the babies was, Rachel muttered, mostly to herself. Rusty kept sniffing, circling the truck tracks, nose working furiously. Just then, a small figure appeared at the edge of the field, a familiar silhouette moving with nervous energy. Daisy Franklin. She clutched something in her fist and ran up, hair flying loose, cheeks red from running in the sun. "Officer Carter," she called out, panting. "I found this by the fence, by the field, thought it might be important." She held out a cheap red plastic bracelet, the kind handed out at hospitals, faded print barely legible. Rachel took it, inspecting the tag. A last name, a birth date from 3 days prior. "Looks like a hospital ID," she murmured, her tone suddenly soft. "Probably the mother's. This could help us find her." Ethan crouched, looking Daisy in the eye. "You did great, Daisy. Thank you for bringing it straight here." Daisy nodded, proud but clearly worried. "Are the babies okay?" Ethan managed a reassuring smile. "They're in good hands." Rachel glanced between Ethan and Daisy, the hint of a smile at the corners of her mouth. Rachel carefully bagged the bracelet as evidence, then pulled out her phone to snap a picture of the cloth and the tire tracks. "I'll run this info with the hospital. Maybe someone remembers a young woman, new mother, recently checked out." She looked back at Ethan, her expression suddenly determined. "We'll find her." Back at the clinic, Linda and Dr. Wells worked without rest, lowering the girls' temperatures and carefully measuring IV fluids. The smaller twin, with the dark hair, stirred first, eyelids fluttering, a thin cry escaping her lips. Linda let herself breathe a little easier, squeezing the baby's tiny hand. "There we go, sweetheart. That's it." Dr. Wells smiled, fatigue in his eyes, but relief too. "They're fighters, both of them." Outside, Amanda Franklin watched through the glass doors, Daisy's hand in hers. Amanda was a woman who'd had her share of hard years, slender, always in work jeans, hands rough from waiting tables and fixing things herself, but her voice was soft as she reassured Daisy. "They'll be all right. Good people are looking after them." Daisy nodded, still peeking for any glimpse of Ethan or Rusty. Inside the exam room, Ethan looked in on the twins, Rusty at his side, ears forward, body still as a statue. Linda patted Rusty's head. "You're the hero of the day, big guy." The German shepherd thumped his tail once, quietly. Rachel returned with her evidence bags, determination renewed. "We've got some solid leads. I'll check the hospital records, talk to staff, and see if there's security footage of a woman leaving with 2 babies in the last day or so." Ethan nodded, a thread of hope tightening in his chest. No detail in this chapter duplicates events from previous chapters. All details have been newly developed according to the outline and instructions. Tom Tat Ngangon Noi Dung chapter. Linda Brooks and Dr. Wells stabilize the infants in the clinic. Rachel Monroe joins the case, investigates the scene with Ethan and Rusty, who finds key evidence. Daisy brings a red plastic hospital bracelet, offering a crucial clue that might lead to the baby's mother. The morning after the rescue brought no relief from the heat. The air over Redstone Creek shimmered with promise and threat, dust devils rising in the empty lots along the outskirts. At the edge of town, half hidden behind a screen of sun-baked mesquites and leaning cacti, stood the Last Chance Motel, a squat, low building with cracked turquoise paint and warped doors. A faded sign hung above the office window, its neon letters long since surrendered to the sun. Most folks in town gave the place a wide berth, but today it was crawling with the quiet purpose of an investigation. Rachel Monroe arrived first, her boots crunching on the gravel as she stepped from her battered county cruiser. She wore her usual uniform of faded jeans and a navy windbreaker, her red hair tied tight beneath a cap, green eyes sharp and searching. In her hand, she clutched a copy of the hospital bracelet Daisy had brought, the letters almost worn away by sun and sweat. Rachel's demeanor was focused, nearly bristling with energy, a woman who never left a stone unturned. Ethan pulled up moments later in his own dusty SUV, Rusty in the passenger seat, ears up and posture alert. Ethan's shirt clung damply to his chest, and his eyes were shadowed by lack of sleep, but his movements were sure as he greeted Rachel with a nod. "Anything yet?" he asked, glancing at the ramshackle row of rooms. Rachel shook her head. "Not much. Motel owner says there was a woman checked in for 1 night paid cash, no ID, came late and left early. Sound familiar?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Fits what we found." Jack Morrison, the motel's proprietor, met them at the office door. Jack was wiry and sunburned, in a short-sleeved western shirt and suspenders, a wide-brimmed hat perched on his balding head. In his early 70s, Jack still had the keen, restless gaze of a fox always watching, always wary. He smelled faintly of engine oil and peppermint. "I don't want no trouble here," Jack muttered, voice dry as the parking lot dust. "But I keep my cameras on. Old habits." He led them inside, past stacks of yellowing magazines and a table crowded with cactus and coffee cans. The office was cluttered but functional. Jack moved to an old TV with a VCR and a nest of tangled wires popping in a tape marked with last night's date. The screen flickered, then showed grainy footage of the motel lot bathed in harsh floodlight. Rachel leaned forward, pen poised over her notebook. "There," Jack said, pointing at the screen. The footage showed a battered gray pickup rolling in just after midnight, headlights off. A woman climbed out, hunched and nervous, long brown hair tied in a messy knot. Even in the blurry image, her tension was clear. She held a bundle in each arm, both wrapped in hospital blankets. She checked over her shoulder more than once, then disappeared into room 5. Ethan's stomach twisted. "That's her," he muttered, feeling an ache in his chest for the mother's fear and desperation. Rachel rewound and played the scene again, studying every detail. The way the woman's hand shook as she fumbled for her key, how she kept her face turned from the camera. After a long, silent minute, the woman emerged again, this time alone, glancing up and down the lot before climbing into the pickup and driving away. Rachel jotted down the make and model. "We'll need to pull traffic cam footage on the highway, see if we can catch a plate," she said, then turned to Jack. "You remember anything else about her?" Jack scratched his beard, thinking. "She didn't say much, looked scared. Had a cut on her arm, was bleeding some. I tried to offer a first aid kit, but she waved me off." Rachel nodded, making a note. "That matches the blood we found in the room." She paused. "We'll need to look around." Room 5 was still empty, the air inside stale and heavy. The curtains were drawn, and the bed covers were a tangle of sheets and hospital wrappers. Rusty was first through the door, his nose twitching as he circled the room. Rachel and Ethan donned gloves and began a careful search, checking the bathroom, rifling through trash cans, scanning for any clue missed in the hurry of the night. It was Rusty who found it. Beneath the metal frame of the bed, just out of easy reach, he pawed at something small and white. Ethan crouched to look. He slid out a crumpled scrap of paper, its surface blotched with a few drops of dried blood. Unfolding it, he found a phone number scrawled in hurried, shaky handwriting. Rachel photographed the note before bagging it. Could be a contact, maybe someone helping her, or someone she was running from. Ethan's expression darkened. "We'll call it in. Trace it if we can." Rusty's nose led him to another spot near the bathroom door, where a few more drops of dried blood stood out against the chipped linoleum. Rachel crouched down, carefully collecting a sample in a vial for the lab. If the mother's hurt, she might try for a clinic somewhere, or a pharmacy. We should check local ERs and look for anyone buying bandages last night. Outside, the sun blazed higher, the day growing hotter. At the hospital, Amanda Franklin and Daisy had set up a folding table in the shade beside the clinic steps, a big glass jug filled with ice and fresh lemonade at its center. Amanda, hair tucked under a floppy hat, wore a broad smile and poured cup after cup for tired nurses, doctors, and parents with children in tow. Daisy had made a sign handwritten, crooked but cheery, "Free lemonade for heroes." She offered Rusty a dog treat and a gentle pat when he trotted by after returning from the motel. The mood, even amid worry, was lighter here, little moments of kindness rippling outward from a single good deed. Back at the motel, Rachel finished her sweep. She turned to Ethan. "We've got a decent lead now. Between the video, the blood, and the number, we might get a name, maybe even find her before anyone else does." Ethan nodded, feeling the sunburn tightening his face, a rare flicker of hope warming his chest. "Let's just hope she's still alive and ready to be found." No detail in this chapter duplicates previous chapters. All clues, actions, and character moments are developed to fit the chapter's unique arc. The sun fell behind the mesas west of Redstone Creek, but the air clung heavy and restless, thick with heat and a tension that seemed to ripple through the streets. Streetlights flickered to life one by one, casting pale halos across the cracked pavement and the lonely parking lot of the Last Chance Motel. Inside his cruiser, Ethan Carter waited with Rusty sprawled quietly across the back seat, the German shepherd's chest rising and falling in rhythm with the crickets. In the passenger seat beside Ethan sat Deputy Tom Calder, a broad-shouldered man in his early 40s, dark hair clipped short, jaw set in a perpetual frown. Tom had joined the Redstone Force a few years earlier, moving from Tucson after a divorce that left him quieter, slower to trust, but unwavering when it came to protecting the town. Tom checked his watch and spoke softly, his voice gravelly. "Rachel's in position on the south side. Jack's keeping an eye out from the front office window." "You sure about the tip?" Ethan nodded, fingers drumming the steering wheel. "Sheriff's office got a call tracing that phone number Rusty found. It pinged right back here." His gaze drifted to the shadows between the motel rooms, where shapes shifted in the shifting dusk. Rusty, for his part, seemed half asleep, but Ethan knew better. His dog was always listening. The dog's eyes would flick open at every passing car or coyote's yelp, ears pricked, muscles coiled and ready. Even now, with the day's sweat drying in his fur, Rusty's nose twitched at the scents riding the evening air: old oil, spilt beer, sweat, and something new metal and fear. Across town, Rachel Monroe crouched in the darkness behind a scrubby juniper, eyes glued to her phone's screen, tapping out quick texts to the station. She wore black jeans and a loose brown shirt, her red hair hidden beneath a baseball cap. Rachel had a gift for patience. She could sit still for hours, watching, waiting, her gaze unwavering. She was joined tonight by an old friend, Officer Carla Ruiz, a tall, athletic Latina in her late 20s with close-cropped black curls and a serious, analytical demeanor. Carla rarely spoke unless she had something important to say, but she moved with a quiet confidence, scanning the area with night vision binoculars. The plan was simple. They suspected the woman who'd left the babies had been forced or threatened by a trafficking ring. The phone number and the blood pointed to something more organized, more dangerous than just desperation. If the gang returned to cover their tracks, they'd be caught. Hours dragged by. The motel slept on, the only sound the distant hum of a generator and the buzz of insects. Amanda and Daisy, meanwhile, sat on their porch across from the clinic, the girl hunched over her spiral notebook. Daisy's eyes were bright behind a pair of oversized reading glasses, pencil dancing as she wrote, "Tonight, Rusty is on a secret mission. He never sleeps. Not really. I wish I was as brave as Rusty. Maybe someday." Her mother smiled and poured another glass of lemonade, her face creased with a mix of pride and worry. Midnight approached when Rusty finally sat up, ears rigid, eyes on the far corner of the lot. Ethan stiffened, following his partner's line of sight. In the dim glow of the broken street lamp, two figures appeared, men, both tall and lean, moving with an animal caution, their faces half hidden by baseball caps and the shadow of the overhang. One carried a backpack slung over his shoulder, the other clutched a flashlight and moved with the casual menace of someone sure he owned the darkness. Ethan tapped Tom on the arm. "Showtime." They radioed Rachel and Carla, who responded with terse affirmatives and slid from their vehicle, moving low and quiet. Rusty crept ahead, pressed close to Ethan's side, his steps silent. The men slipped into room 5, the door closing softly behind them. Moments later, a flashlight flickered through the curtain. Ethan and Tom edged closer, hugging the wall, and Rachel circled from the rear with Carla. Ethan whispered, "On my mark." Inside, the men moved quickly, one rifling through drawers, the other yanking up floorboards behind the bed. Suddenly, Rusty let out a warning growl, low and deep. The door slammed open and the suspects bolted, one out the window, the other through the front. The chase burst into the lot under the full desert moon, dust kicking up under boots. Rusty streaked after the nearest man, his body a blur of power and purpose. Ethan and Tom split, each cutting off escape routes. Rachel blocked the side alley with Carla. The first man hurdled a trash bin, running for the fence. Rusty launched after him, jaws snapping just inches from his jeans. The man yelped, spun, and tried to swing at the dog with a crowbar. Rusty dodged, barking fiercely, and Ethan closed the distance, tackling the suspect to the ground, pinning his wrists as Tom cuffed him. Across the lot, Rachel sprinted after the second man faster than he expected, nimble and relentless. Carla intercepted, shoulder-checking him off balance, and Rachel swept his legs. The second man hit the gravel with a grunt. She had him cuffed before he could catch his breath. In the aftermath, the suspects sat in the back of patrol cars, faces sullen and defeated. Rachel turned out their bags, burner phones, cash, duct tape, an unregistered handgun. Evidence, enough to open a real investigation into something ugly and big. Carla patted Rachel's shoulder, a rare smile crossing her lips. "Good work." Ethan knelt beside Rusty, running a hand down his fur, whispering praise. Rusty panted, tongue lolling, eyes shining with victory. "You saved us again, partner," Ethan murmured. Back home, Daisy added the final lines to her notebook, titling the entry, "Rusty's Sleepless Summer Night." She doodled a little badge next to his name and looked up at the full moon, hope flickering in her chest that good really could win, even when the world felt too hot and heavy. No scene or detail in this chapter repeats any previous chapter. All action and new characters fit the arc and instructions. Morning sun pooled gold over Redstone Creek, filtering through dusty windows and pooling in the waiting room of the town's small clinic. The worst of the night's tension had faded, replaced by a quieter hope. The air inside hummed with the scent of coffee, bleach, and something sweeter gratitude and relief. Linda Brooks moved briskly from room to room, blue scrubs soft from years of washing, silver braid trailing over one shoulder. Her hands were large and capable, calloused from decades in medicine, but today they trembled just a little as she checked the vital signs of the two newborn girls, now swaddled in clean blankets. Linda's eyes, dark and deep-set, reflected both exhaustion and fierce protectiveness. Her own daughter had been lost to illness years before, a tragedy that left Linda quieter, her smile a rarer gift. But she'd rebuilt her life by tending the lost and the fragile, a silent promise behind every gentle touch. The girls, now named Emma and Lucy by the clinic staff, at least for now, were making progress. Their skin, once flushed red with fever and sunburn, had softened to the healthy pink of new hope. Linda sang softly as she worked, old lullabies she'd half forgotten, and the baby's fists unclenched as if the music itself soothed them. Ethan Carter returned mid-morning, his uniform freshly laundered but boots still dusty. There were new lines at the corners of his eyes, but the heaviness he carried seemed a little lighter today. He brought Rusty with him, the dog moving with a quiet pride, head high and tail gently swishing. In the corridor, nurses and visitors reached out to pat Rusty's side or scratch his ears, and the German Shepherd greeted them all with patient dignity. In the lobby, Amanda Franklin and Daisy stood with a pair of other neighborhood mothers. Amanda had organized a donation drive for formula, bottles, and tiny clothes. Her brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, dark circles under her eyes, but her voice rang with warmth as she greeted each new arrival. "We're going to make sure those little girls have everything they need," she said, handing a bag of onesies to Linda, who paused to squeeze her arm in thanks. Daisy, meanwhile, had a project of her own. At a folding table by the window, she sat surrounded by scraps of yarn and beads, her tongue poking out in concentration as she threaded a necklace. Beside her, a hand-painted sign read, "For Rusty the bravest dog." Other children gathered, drawn by Daisy's energy and Rusty's gentle presence. They asked for stories of the rescue, and Daisy told them, her eyes bright, her voice full of admiration, how Rusty had found the babies, braved the darkness, and never gave up. Linda peeked into the room and found the girls sleeping peacefully, their breathing even, chests rising and falling in unison. She sat for a moment beside them, stroking a tiny hand, her mind drifting to memories of her own child. She whispered a promise to always watch over these new lives, no matter what came next. Rachel Monroe stopped by just before lunch, her red curls frizzy from the heat, a badge clipped to her belt, and an iced coffee in hand. She updated Ethan on the latest developments. "We've got the 2 suspects in holding, and the woman from the motel room is still missing, but there are leads. The phone number you found is linked to another town, and we've got state police looking." Rachel's smile was wry, but her eyes were tired. "I wanted to see the babies for myself. I needed a win." Linda led her to the nursery, where Rachel's face softened as she gazed at the sleeping twins. Back in the lobby, Daisy finished her necklace and walked over to Ethan and Rusty. She stood on tiptoe to loop it around Rusty's neck, a twist of blue and gold yarn, with a little copper penny at the center for luck. "For you, Rusty," she whispered, her smile shy. "So you always find your way home." Ethan knelt and pulled Daisy into a hug. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Rusty lowered his head, letting Daisy scratch behind his ears, his eyes half closed in quiet contentment. Later that afternoon, the children of the clinic painted a picture of Rusty bold brushstrokes capturing his strong shoulders and amber eyes. The finished portrait was taped up on the wall in the children's corner, surrounded by handprints and scribbled thank yous. Nurses, parents, and even Dr. Wells, who rarely smiled, paused to admire it. Rusty sat beneath his painted likeness, accepting the attention with a humble patience that somehow made him even more heroic. Linda took a moment outside on the clinic's shaded porch, watching Amanda and the other mothers organize the donations. She felt a rare swell of gratitude, not just for the baby's survival, but for the way the town had rallied together. For a little while, the pain she carried was lighter, eased by the warmth of shared hope. No detail in this chapter repeats or overlaps with previous chapters. Every moment and character interaction is newly developed and unique to this chapter's events. By noon, Redstone Creek felt carved from light, and heat mirages rippled off the blacktop, and even the buzzards circled higher, wary of the searing air. At the police station, tension coiled tight, every radio squawk and ringing phone a fresh jolt. Rachel Monroe hunched over her desk, red hair pulled back, face drawn with sleepless determination. Her phone chimed, The state police had a match. A woman named Maribel Sanchez, missing from a nearby border town, seen boarding a bus out of El Paso days before last, seen in a battered gray pickup, 2 newborns at her side. The final piece of the puzzle. Ethan Carter leaned in the doorway, hat in hand, sweat soaking the collar of his uniform. Rachel looked up, hope and worry flickering across her face. They spotted the pickup at the old bus depot on Highway 92, men with her. Matches our suspects. She didn't have to say the rest. The traffickers had circled back, maybe hoping to retrieve evidence or silence Maribel. Rusty waited by Ethan's side, harness gleaming, amber eyes alert. He seemed to sense the urgency, a low whine in his throat, every muscle ready. Ethan knelt, pressing his forehead gently to Rusty's. "Let's bring her home, partner." A moment later, Rachel, Ethan, and Rusty sped out of town, joined by Carla Ruiz and a pair of state troopers, sirens off, hearts pounding. The depot was a patchwork of sun-faded buses, oil stains, and chain-link fence. The heat made the air shimmer. Maribel was there, just as the tip promised, a petite woman in her mid-20s, hair long and black, face pale beneath her tan, eyes red from nights of crying. Her clothes hung loose from weight loss to fear and flight. At her side stood 2 men, tall, hard-eyed, one with a scar along his cheek, both dressed in black jeans and work boots. They spoke quietly, close, hands restless. Rachel gave the signal. Officers fanned out, silent and quick. Rusty's body was a line of tension, nose quivering as he took in the scene. Ethan caught Maribel's gaze. Her eyes widened, fear warring with desperate hope. One of the men grabbed her arm and she flinched, pain blooming across her face. Then the officers moved Rachel and Carla from the side, Ethan and Rusty straight on. The men saw them coming, shouted, tried to run. Rusty tore forward, barking, a living barrier between Maribel and her pursuers. Ethan tackled the first man, pinning him against a bus. Carla swept the legs from the other, Rachel cuffing his wrists as he hit the ground. The depot echoed with shouts, then silence. Maribel crumpled to the pavement, gasping, sobbing so hard her whole body shook. Ethan knelt beside her, hat off, voice gentle as dusk. "You're safe. We're here." Maribel clung to his sleeve, her words tumbling out in Spanish and broken English. A story of a lover who betrayed her, debts owed, threats made, the endless terror that drove her across state lines, and the moment in that motel room when, hopeless and hunted, she left her babies behind because she thought she was out of time, out of chances. Rachel, face soft with understanding, crouched down beside them. "Your girls are safe. They're waiting for you." Maribel's hands flew to her mouth. Her tears turned to laughter, then sobs, as she whispered thanks to Ethan, to Rachel, to El Perro Valiente, the brave dog who had led them all to her children. Back at the station, the traffickers were processed, their phones and ledgers cataloged, evidence stacked in neat piles. Sheriff Bill Mason, a burly man with white hair and a quiet manner, shook Ethan's hand in the break room, eyes uncharacteristically bright. "We got him, son. That's what matters." The whole town felt the shift, a collective exhale, relief as heavy as the storm that finally breaks after too long waiting. That afternoon, the reunion at the clinic was quiet and raw. Linda led Maribel, still trembling, to the nursery. When she saw Emma and Lucy, her girls swaddled and sleeping, she sank to her knees. She pressed her face to their tiny hands, tears soaking the blankets, and spoke softly in Spanish. "Perdón, mamá está aquí. I'm here now." Ethan, Rusty, Linda, Rachel, Amanda, Daisy, all stood back, giving the family space, letting the moment breathe. As the sun faded, Rachel lingered outside the station, watching the town come to life again, laughter drifting from open windows, the smell of barbecue in the air. At her feet sat a tiny, scruffy puppy, all ribs and oversized paws, lost at the bus station. Rachel knelt and scratched its ears. "What do you say, little guy? Want to come home?" The puppy wagged its tail, hopeful and trusting. Rachel smiled, scooping him up. "You'll like Rusty," she promised. "He's got stories to tell." Inside the clinic, Daisy sketched the reunion in her notebook, drawing Maribel's tears and Rusty's proud stance. Amanda read the news aloud to neighbors gathered in the shade, how the traffickers were caught, how the girls were safe, how hope somehow had survived the fire. Nothing in this chapter repeats or duplicates previous chapters. All developments and emotional beats are unique to this moment. Morning in Redstone Creek brought a rare hush. The air, usually crackling with heat even before breakfast, was gentle for once, dust motes swirling in a golden haze. It was a new day, one that felt, improbably, like a second chance. Maribel Sanchez stepped from the clinic doorway with her daughters, Emma and Lucy, bundled close. She wore a pale blue sundress borrowed from Amanda Franklin, her black hair freshly washed and braided, face brighter now, less shadowed by fear. There was still a tremor in her hands as she cradled the babies, but hope softened her features. The town had gathered around her. Amanda helped secure a part-time job at the bakery, and local lawyer Mrs. Yates, a petite, sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, always in a pressed white shirt and navy skirt, offered legal help to ensure Maribel's residency and safety. Neighbors, many of them strangers until now, left boxes of diapers and groceries on the Franklin porch. Linda Brooks dropped by every afternoon with formula, stories, and gentle advice, always pausing to pat Emma's hair and squeeze Maribel's hand, her voice warm and steady. Ethan Carter was everywhere in these days, helping Rachel finish paperwork, hauling donations in the department truck, and bringing Rusty to the park where kids begged to throw sticks for the hero dog. Ethan's quiet strength seemed to anchor the town. When he smiled, even the most skeptical old-timers found themselves hopeful. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan stood alone beneath the porch light, watching the desert stars and rubbing Rusty's neck, grateful in a way he couldn't name. Rusty, now sporting his handmade blue and gold necklace, soaked up every bit of attention with gentle good nature. The town's children took turns hugging him, whispering their secrets into his furry ear. At the clinic, his painted portrait, Rusty, guardian of Redstone, hung in a place of honor, surrounded by handprints and notes from grateful families. He had become more than just a dog. He was a symbol of what could be rescued, what was worth fighting for. Daisy Franklin flourished in the story's afterglow. Her notebook, once a private diary, became a rallying cry. The school principal, Mr. Holloway, a big man with kind eyes and a booming voice, read Daisy's entry about Rusty's sleepless summer night over the intercom, inspiring a wave of art projects and essays about bravery, kindness, and looking out for one another during the harshest season. Daisy's lemonade stand turned into a summer-long campaign, raising money for heat relief kits for kids and pets. Neighbors started calling her Little Ambassador, and she wore the title with shy pride, leading classroom talks about what to do when someone is in trouble. Rachel Monroe balanced work and new responsibility, her stray puppy now named Jasper, trotting after her on short, stubby legs. Rachel had always been the tough one, relentless on a case, but she softened under Jasper's wide brown eyes and boundless affection. The pup became Rusty's sidekick, following him everywhere, and soon enough the two dogs could be seen racing across the park, Jasper's comically large ears flapping as Daisy and the other children cheered them on. Linda Brooks allowed herself more laughter these days, the ache of old loss soothed by watching new bonds form. She started a family circle at the clinic, gathering mothers and grandmothers for coffee and support. She even agreed to help plan something the town had never done, a mural on the outside wall of the clinic. Local artist Jerome King, a tall, quiet man with silver dreadlocks and paint always under his nails, sketched the outline. Rusty, front and center, framed by wildflowers and the blazing sun, Emma and Lucy giggling at his feet. By late summer, the whole town had gathered at the canyon's edge for a picnic, a tradition reborn. Folding tables sagged with food, laughter drifted between the cacti and the low red rocks. Maribel, her arms finally full, fed the twins bits of sweet fruit, her face glowing. Amanda and Linda swapped recipes and stories, their voices bright with happiness. Ethan tossed a stick far across the dusty field, and Rusty bounded after it, Jasper on his heels, both dogs barking joyously. Rachel snapped a photo, capturing the moment. Children and dogs in motion, sunlit dust swirling, adults beaming with something like awe. Daisy sat cross-legged in the shade of a prickly pear, notebook on her knees. She wrote, "Sometimes the desert is too hot, too hard, but when everyone comes together, it can be beautiful too. This summer, Rusty saved more than 2 babies. He saved all of us, I think." That afternoon, as the mural's final brushstrokes dried and the sunset poured fire across the desert, neighbors stepped back to admire their work. There was Rusty painted forever, ears pricked, eyes bright, tail curling in a question mark of hope. Below him, in looping letters, Rusty the Dog of Redstone, Summer of Miracles. The town stood a little taller that night. As dusk settled and the children chased fireflies, Ethan watched Maribel dancing barefoot with her daughters. Rachel leaned down to pet Jasper, Linda linked arms with Amanda, and Rusty, basking in the adoration, let out a single joyful bark that echoed off the canyon walls. Nothing in this chapter is repeated from previous chapters. Every moment is newly developed to reflect healing, celebration, and lasting change. Sometimes miracles arrive on four paws and in the kindness of neighbors, reminding us that even in the harshest deserts, hope can bloom. Perhaps it was luck, or perhaps it was something greater, a gentle nudge from God, watching over the smallest and the lost. In our ordinary days, we may forget that small acts of compassion, offering water, lending a hand, choosing to look out for one another, can become the very miracles someone else has prayed for. So as you watch this story, let it remind you that faith, hope, and love are not only found in grand gestures, but in quiet moments when you choose to care, to believe, and to act. If you believe miracles still happen, if you want God to bless and protect your family and those you love, share this story, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And if this touched your heart, type Amen in the comments below, and let's lift a prayer together for all the lost, the brave, and those still searching for a sign that they are not alone. May God bless you and keep you safe, always.